Now today, as we sit here with a nice cup of coffee, I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to roll into some voiceover for an awesome little project. Don't touch the screen, okay? Don't touch it. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's used to erase stuff. Wow. What else can you find? What else can you find? See what else you can find in the studio to touch and grab a hold of. Now this is kind of like a side highlight clip of a full-length project, and that being the actual zombie decapitated 3D sculpted tumbler that we created from a 40-ounce Stanley. Shout out to Stanley. Now, of course, I promised in that video that we would make this little side clip, so that way that clip was not so long. And as promised, here we are. So as promised, we're going to go ahead and go into this little highlight clip of the kind of full-length content of us creating that massive decapitated zombie tumbler. And to do so, we're going to begin with a block of Sculpey Original. Let's get to it, guys. All right, you guys, so let's jump into this voiceover here. Now, this is going to just be very casual and just really laid back. And I thought it'd be really cool just to kind of focus in on just sculpting of the ear. Although we're going to use some UV resin and some magnets later on in the process, just kind of like attach it to the tumbler itself and just use that really cool element to challenge us in that project. I just thought it'd be kind of cool to just make a dedicated ear sculpting and painting video, even if it is a zombie, right? So it gives it a lot of leeway. We don't have to make it super anatomically correct. It's just really laid back and really fun. So as you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm sculpting the overall shape of the ear lobe. And now the shape of the ear that we have here is generally the same shape as the ear that's already attached to the side of the tumbler and is already baked. But I did go ahead and create this and sculpted it to perfection, and then I molded the side of the tumbler around this already baked item, and that allowed me to get a perfect uniform fit between the two items, kind of like a puzzle piece. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to go ahead and start to carve away the anatomy of the cartilage around the ear, as well as down towards the ear canal, and just get the general shape. As long as you get the general shape kind of right, most people's mind's eye will kind of take over from there and understand that it's an ear. But you do want to have a natural taper towards the bottom of the earlobe, as well as make sure you have that concave portion around the ear canal. As we're doing this voiceover here, I am enjoying a nice cup of coffee. It is, of course, the fall season. Of course, pumpkin spice is my coffee creamer of choice. As soon as the fall season gets over with here, we'll be going back to drinking just black coffee. But when the pumpkin spice is here, I do enjoy that. Using just a wire tool here, I'm going to go ahead and start removing a little bit more clay as we work through this process. And I will also shape the outside edges of the ear as we work through it as well. But as you can see, I'm just kind of just tugging the clay very roughly. It doesn't really matter how or where you're tugging it, as long as you're just removing areas in the correct way. Now you will also notice that I will not make a lot of these kind of cutouts as deep as they possibly could be in more of a realistic setting. If this was going to be a truly realistic ear, I would probably dig these little cut lines into the cartilage a lot deeper. And I would also probably even go as far to sculpt veining inside that. But just remember that we're going to be going over this with paint. Not just like a translucent paint, but we're going to be going over it with a little bit of a thicker grade of paint, just to make sure we get a nice cool green to brown zombie skin look, as the customer who commissioned this had requested. So we're going to make sure that we make it a little bit thicker. So we're not going to really just sculpt in all those micro details. We're kind of leave it nice and open and into interpretation. And the reason we're not going to also make those sculpt lines really deep is because we want to make sure that the UV resin or two-part epoxy, depending on what we're using, has something to really settle into. And anytime you have jagged edges and you have to go over it with UV resin or two-part epoxy, it just leaves areas where the epoxy can be very thin. So if we can go out of our way to avoid those situations where we're creating really thin patches of epoxy or UV resin, then we should do so. So it depends on the situation, depends on how I sculpt each individual item. So if it's not as deep as you would naturally see the ear when you sculpt it in a realistic setting, that's why. And I just want you to understand that. So at the end of the video, if you're like, man, that's just not deep as it should be around the upper ear, around the cartilage of the ear, Just that's the reason why I want to create nice smooth overall textures for the epoxy and UV resin to settle into. All right, so here we are. I'm using just a wire removal tool here, and as I work through the process here, I'll start to take away a little bit less clay at a time. So you'll start to see me really start to shape over the cartilage and the skin texture here in a few moments. Now let's talk about clay here. Now this is Sculpting Original, and I really do like this clay for the majority of my oven bake needs. And let's be honest, guys, I'm an artist and I do sell art, but I also want to try to make money to invest in other forms of art. So I'm here to make money as well. Let's not lie about that. I make art. I enjoy the process. I enjoy sharing it with you on YouTube, but I do make money at my art so I can invest in other mediums as my art career and journey grows. And I do want to get into some bigger forms of art, so I try to make money selling my art. Now that justifies the amount of materials that I buy. So right now, why would you not buy a piece of like a block of clay that's half the price if it gives the same effect? Now we're going to go over all this clay with paint, and then of course the epoxy or UV resins. So in the long-term effect, as long as the clay is not super porous or very soft, when you put those epoxy layers on it, it really doesn't matter what grade of clay that you use, as long as it has the firmness to support the epoxy that you're putting on it. If I use like a super soft, like a paper clay or something, sometimes that would not survive the epoxy process. Or if you were to push on the epoxy, then it would kind of divot and cause a breakage in the epoxy layers. So everything we use is for a reason, but if we want to come out cheaper, then we're going to choose a cheaper clay. I really like Sculpting Original. Not only is it easier for those who enjoy my content to get into, to start sculpting on their own, they can follow along with their own block of clay, but it's a beginner level. At this time, at a point in time, however, it is around $6 or $7 for a pound at Walmart. That's usually where I buy mine. Honestly, I'll just swing by Walmart on lunch or something at my 9 to 5, and I'll pick up a clay block when I need it. Or I'll buy 3 or 4 at a time, and I'll just buy all the ones they have. But if it ever gets to a point where it doesn't justify the price of the clay that I'm using at the time, then I will definitely be switching up brands. I'm not a brand loyalist unless I'm sponsored by them, and that is not at this time. Now here I am using an embossing tool. I'm going to go ahead and start to add a lot of striations and skin tone here. And the overall skin tone that we're going to be applying here is going to match the skin tone of the face that we're applying this to. And that can change depending on the overall texture of the skin, whether it's a vampire, or a zombie, or a Frankenstein, or it could be like just a human being. I like this clay just because it is really easy to work with and it's really easy to move it around. Now, don't get me wrong though, if you're working with a very soft clay like this, then sometimes the things you sculpt in will get washed out if you apply too much pressure to them. But there's some different things that you can do to kind of alleviate that process. Using a silicone tip tool here, I'm applying a lot of striations here in different directions that I believe that the overall skin tone should be in. So going around the top of the ear, the lobe, and things like that, just giving a lot of diversity here. We're going to go in with an X-Acto knife and give it some nice jagged edge cuts. But these aren't going to be too jagged to where like the epoxy won't like cover it up easily. And we're going to taper this. So what we'll do after this is we'll apply this to the actual tumbler itself, and we'll sculpt the clay around the ear of the head itself to get that perfect fit. So here I am just kind of like using that X-Acto knife to kind of taper that cut line. And like I said, it doesn't have to be super jagged or anything like that. What we're going to do is we will paint it later in like this nice little simple blood paint way. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and grab the tumbler that we've been working on. Now this is the zombie not baked. It has not been baked yet. And the reason I'm not baked is because I want to do a single bake on it. Now, I often will do double bakes on things, especially if I want to do like the back side of it. But for this one, I just didn't need to do that. So we're going to do a single bake on this project. Now, before we can bake the actual zombie itself, which you can check out the full-length content about that in that full-length video in the info card above, as well as the linked video at the very end of this content. Now you can see I'm going to use that already baked to perfection ear, and we're going to kind of press this into the side of the head, and we're going to get a perfect molded fit for the ear that we have. So we're going to do a little bit of a build-up on the outside of the head. We want to make sure that when the ear is removed that it still looks pretty cool. So we're going to go ahead and build up around the jawbone, around the eye bone there. What's the eye bone called? Orbital bone, maybe, I don't know. As well as the temple there, and then the top of the scalp there. We're going to make sure that the ear has a little bit of overhang on the back right hand side of the actual head itself to give that nice shadow effect. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and jagged the outside edges of the cut line also. So we're going to go ahead and build this up here. As you can see, we haven't sculpted around the back of the tumbler quite yet. We will do that in the next portion of that video. But that would be in the next stages of the actual sculpt process for the actual zombie decapitated head itself. We're using just a concave metal sculpting tool here. I love this tool. It's one of my favorites. And we're going to go ahead and apply a little bit of jaggedness here, and then we're going to do a form fit to this. Now, just be aware, I'm going to push a little bit harder than I need to, and I'm also going to wiggle it back and forth to get a nice streamlined finished effect. Looking pretty good. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit here, and we're going to go ahead and drill 3 pilot holes. Now I decided to do 3 just because I really wanted the ear to sit really like straight and flush. So we're going to do 3 instead of just 1 or 2. Definitely wouldn't do 1, but you could probably get away with 2 if you wanted to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill these out just deep enough for the first magnet to lay into. Now, sometimes I'll have the magnet sticking out, sometimes I won't. In this situation, I'm actually going to countersink the magnets far enough in to where I can paint over them, and then the UV resin layer will be over those magnets. So we'll go ahead and drill these holes here. As you can see, the Sculpting original is very easy to drill into. Just take your time drilling the pilot hole that you need. Alright, so test fitting it there to see what it could potentially look like. I decided to go ahead and drill 1 more because it is still under that flat portion of that ear. Looking pretty good. Oh, that coffee's so good. That coffee is so good. Alright, so now we have all 3 pilot holes drilled there. Now I may have to drill them out a little bit more, so we'll keep the drill nearby. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and test fit these. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in. There's 2 magnets back to back. And I'll go ahead and push these into the softened clay to get the overall holes that we need. Now when I do this, it's also going to magically attach to the actual the tumbler itself if you push them in far enough. And then logically those would stay behind. It depends on what type of material the tumbler is actually made of. It depends on whether or not this happens. Alright, so I've already glued these into position here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and push these into the clay. I did go ahead and give the back of the ear just a little bit of a base coat of Mars Black, but technically we're not really in the painting process quite yet. As you can see, I did push that in, and when I removed it, because the tumbler is metallic and magnetic, those magnets do stay behind. I'm going to pull these out with a pair of pliers very gently straight out so I don't remove or destroy the holes that I have built up there. Of course, the magnet had to get stuck to my needle nose pliers there. And then once we have that removed there, now get ready, we're about to pull out some paint, guys. Now this was just me just on the very end clip of this portion of the painting process of me just putting a layer on the spine on the back of the cup, those exposed vertebrae. And we're going to turn it over here and we're going to give the ear a little bit of a paint layer. Now just remember that the painting process for this is very simplistic. And as you can see, I did paint the overall ear, removed ear cut line on the side of the skull in a nice bloody manner. But it does not have its final blood effect yet. It has a very dark blood right now, and we're going to brighten it with a little bit more wet looking blood later on in the process. But that is a different video, just be aware of that. Now I'm going to use a little bit of E6000 glue here. Now, I ended up having to do this again for one of them because I just had a bad setting here. But what you're going to do is you're going to put the magnets on the ear itself, and then you're just going to push it in the same way you did before, and you're just going to make sure that those stay in the holes that you had sculpted. Sometimes easier said than done. You just have to kind of like finagle it so it just sits in there perfectly, or look at it from an angle. Just remember that we're going to create a little bit of an air gap between the clay of the ear and the clay of the skull. And the reason for which is you don't want the epoxies or UV resins to kind of stick to each other. And that can sometimes happen when you have two epoxy items together, or they stay together for an extended amount of time, they can get very tacky against each other. Even if they're perfectly cured, that can still happen. So just be aware of that. We want to make sure there's a little bit of an air gap there, even if it's just minuscule. Doing a little bit of carving there. I had a little bit of a rippling on the outside edges of those, even though I've already sculpted that like a hashed sculpt with the red. I really didn't like that kind of rippled look. I felt like it looked very unfinished and unprofessional, so I went ahead and shaved that down, and I'll touch that back up with some paint and some epoxy later on in the process. So all that white E6000 won't be visible later on in the process at all. Pushing that into the side of the head there, and then we'll let this dry overnight, and then we will remove it the next day. So far, as you can see, we have this cute little ear fully sculpted out, and now we're ready to begin painting. Now the painting process is very simplistic. Alrighty, you guys, so I've already started the painting process here. Just remember, I went over it with a sap grain. So very simplistic colors here. It's not a very complicated palette at all. We're literally going to use probably like two or three colors. That's it. The most prominent colors, we're going to give the entire ear a layer of sap green on the forward-facing ear part. We're going to give the ear canal a little bit of Mars black later on in the process. And of course, we're going to give it a nice darkened layer of burnt umber. And then we're just going to do like a few light washes. And this is the same wash that I'll use on the body, or the rest of the skin of the head itself, around the ripply skin around the back, and any surrounding areas around the ear that will need to be kind of blended in the same overall palette of colors. It's just very simplistic. It was just really easy to paint, and it's specifically what the customer had requested is a light green skin color for the zombie. And of course, we're going to oblige and give them exactly what they want. Sorry, we went off camera a little bit there, but it's just a really fun process there. Very, very simplistic. Alrighty. So as you can see, it's going to take a little darkening out before it matches the other ear completely, but we will get it there, not to worry. I believe, if I recall correctly, I came in with a second layer of the same colors, let it dry, and then it came up to be roughly the same color overall. Very easy, very simplistic, and sometimes the simplest paint job is sometimes the best. A little bit of blood splotching there, very easy. Now, once the item is fully painted out to perfection to match the actual tumbler base head skin texture itself, we'll go ahead and go into a UV resin. Now, the UV resin, I just literally lay it on one side at a time and flip it over and let it cure on both sides before I do the other side. That way you don't get any dripping along the outside edges of the ear or on the inside of that cut line. So just be aware, I'm just using UV resin. It's super simple, super easy, and then you just cure it with the UV light, flip it over, and you do the exact same thing. All right, you guys, so here we are jumping back into just the overhead camera here, and here is like kind of like a glamour shot of one of the final clips that I had of the actual tumbler itself. Now remember, this is on a 40-ounce Stanley, a massive, massive tumbler. This thing is a beast. Now I did do a weigh-in in the full-length video, so if you want to check out the entire sculpture, the entire painting process, as well as the actual Flynn sister perfection of epoxy that we used, you can check that out. Look how absolutely incredible the detail work is. Now, don't get me wrong, we sculpted a lot of details in the skin texture, and the overall epoxy handled it magically. Now, here's the focus of this video, is the actual ear itself. Look how great that is, you guys. Don't lie. It's a little gruesome with the overall like boils or the kind of like the plague look to it, but it's still pretty cool. I'm digging it. I may have to make another one of these just to sit in the background of the studio here while I'm doing videos, not to lie. Alright, you guys, so as you can see, we created this little ear from a block of Sculpting original clay into a little painted magnetic perfection. Now, of course, the magnets are hidden inside the ear so they don't kind of get in the way of washing and just usage. And of course, that can be also attached to the refrigerator as well. Pretty cool. Now, as you can see, I also have a little minion here with me. she wanted some attention. And of course, we're about to go color here in a few moments. And there may be some bloopers here in just a second. Hey, oh, you got some pencils? Oh, those are little dude's pencils. Wow. Wow. You want to color in a minute? You want to color in a minute? All right, we're going to color. We're going to color. Beginning to end. Up. Up. Now, one thing that I'll tell you about the actual packaging of this. Now, one thing that I'll tell you about the packaging for this item is because it's a separated ear from the actual Stanley itself, when I do package that, you can see I have one baggie that's tight around the item, and then I'll have one that has air injected into it, so it has like a little bit of a buffer there. It's kind of like you're just putting that in a bubble wrap inside like a full air wrap tube. And I'll put that inside the tumbler as I ship that, so it's just protected. And I'll also wrap that in maybe like a parchment paper just to kind of keep it from shifting and breaking any of the clay away from the main body of the ear. It's very cool, very simplistic, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know that me and little mini-me are going to go ahead and go color with some color pencils because she's been handing me them throughout the creation of this little voiceover. I will catch you guys on the next awesome project. Later, guys. Can you say bye-bye? Say bye-bye. Can you say bye-bye? Ain't gonna happen. That the second bag that the what is it? Thank you. I said thank you. Oh, what is that? It's a little balloon blower upper. Oh, is that cute or what?